You're listening to CaveRadioBroadcasting.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts and do not reflect the management of CaveRadioBroadcasting.com.
Good afternoon and welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. My name is Howard. I'm joined by my two good friends, Dave and David. Our pal Kenny's on the board. How you guys today?
All right.
Good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, everybody doing good? Liking the weather?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. It's almost May, right?
It is May.
It should be. It
Is
should.
it? No, it's not May yet, is it?
It's almost May.
Almost May.
And you got
Yeah.
about a
Technically.
weekend left.
So, in case you haven't noticed, we've classed the place up a bit for this show. We have a very special guest in the studio, my good buddy Kat. How are you this evening?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing good. Just loving the weather. Loving the weather. So, Cathryn is serving on the Lord, and she's here to shed more light on last week's tangent into human trafficking. So, we took a left turn at whatever we were talking about and ended up in human trafficking and child abduction. And I reached out to my buddy Kat, and she happens to know a heck of a lot about the subject, so I figured we'd have her down here to enlighten us and make us a little smarter. But before we get into that, let's mention our sponsors. Elder Care. If your loved one needs extra care at home or in an assisted living facility, give the ladies at Elder Care a call. They'll bring peace back to your life. ElderCareCares.com or 734-671-6518. Give Chriselle a call. She'll be happy to take care of you. And InkOnPaperPrinting.com, your one-stop shop for affordable, quality printed material, business cards, events, programs, posters, brochures, and banners. From design to custom finishing, IOP has you covered. Contact them through their website or email sales@InkOnPaperPrinting.com. Both businesses are locally owned and operated. Support Michigan businesses, people. We got some shout-outs. I am the face of truth.com, 8911truth.org, both great organizations that we fully support and have supported us through the years. And also to the original truther himself, that would be Jesus Christ. So remember, it's not down the conventional hole. As always, don't trust any one person so that you don't carry someone else's mistake with you, including ours. Do your own research because there are no more secrets, only ignorance. So I think it's time for Quotes of the Week, huh? Kat, you want to play Quotes of the Week with us?
Sure. Why not?
Okay.
Kenny, you want? Oh yeah, get close to your mic. Kenny, you going to play this week? I threw a
Or are you
Gandhi
doing
one in
homework?
there for you, man.
I'm still probably ain't going to
You
get it.
had a
though.
layup. All right.
Now I got some stuff going on over on my end.
Okay, so Kenny's going to handle the technical difficulties. Homework.
So here's Kenny's probably surfing porn, and we're going to be talking about like human trafficking, sex.
Well, I did notice he grabbed all Kat's notes and started looking for the websites.
Look at the
Speaking of
butt on this
websites,
one.
I
That's
found
funny.
there's you guys ever heard of Backpage.com?
Yeah, I've heard that.
No.
I've seen it's kind of like a Craigslist, but they do have a section that's deals with adult services.
I mean, I'm guessing.
service.
And they actually crack me up.
So they'll
too.
cut my lawn?
Well, you technically
Naked.
can find guys to do anything. It's like a Craigslist, but
Really?
You
the
guys are
And
gonna
why
feel
were you on
really
Backpage.com?
bad.
the adult personals is ridiculously hyper-sized compared to the other listings.
They make me laugh.
They're an $80 million. I looked them up today. They're an $80 million company, up from
Of
$30
course.
million a few years ago, and
Of
all of it
course
is
they
in
are.
there.
$30 million before the adult listings, correct?
No, I think with obviously they came up because when I was doing research for today's topic, because this is not one that I was really familiar with. This was new information to me, and I was kind of blown away. I was blown away by some of the numbers you guys threw out last week, and then definitely felt touched by it. I listened to a bunch of individual testimonies from people, and moving, and it's a very similar story. But I don't want to. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because we're actually doing a Quotes of the Week game.
Yeah,
if I'm
it's
not
time for
mistaken.
Quotes of the Week.
All right, Kat, you haven't played this yet,
No, I haven't.
so get ready to stop your grinning and drop your linen because this is the most serious part of this show.
All right.
I give out a quote, and I'm going to give 5 choices of who it might have been. We take votes.
We keep score.
And
There's-
loser buys beer for the winners.
There is no participation certificate for this game. You win or you lose.
Yeah, it's
Right.
totally objective.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not a whole fan of the, participate, here's your trophy.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I don't think that's
You do
helpful.
know that DiBiase can see your computer screen, right?
I can't read from that far away, so
Because
it's
he's
fine.
like totally staring at you. Like,
It's just my notes from the show.
why does Dave keep getting 5 out of 5?
Because
I
while we're
can't
here,
read
you're
that.
talking about Jesus and all this other stuff, he's going to see all my open porn surfing websites and online whatever.
Just vetting you a little bit. That's all.
It was research.
That is a joke between Jesus Christ and myself. Okay, quotes of the week.
Bring it.
Here's the first quote. And Kat, you're going to have a chance to be the first guesser. The quote is, and you two guys don't get all hyper because you guys should know this one. But they,
Isaiah. Book of Isaiah.
but they probably won't.
No preemptive answering.
All right. About the time of the end, a body of men will be raised up who will turn their attention to the prophecies and insist upon their literal interpretation in the midst of much clamor and opposition. This was either written or said by Sir Isaac Newton, John from the book of Revelation, John F. Kennedy, Jesus himself, or Nostradamus.
I think it was Jesus himself who said that.
Okay, we have someone that has voted for Jesus today.
I think
He
that's our
always voted
first
for
official
Jesus.
Jesus vote in this game.
He's going to be
What
a
game
choice.
is this? You always got to vote for Jesus.
Well, he
'Cause
hasn't.
even
He
if
hasn't.
I'm
He hasn't
wrong,
been a choice.
Right.
Well, if the quiz is who is the biggest criminal in history, I'm
Yeah.
not voting for him.
Yeah, we'll leave our boy out of that.
Howard.
Oh, it's me.
Well, we're going clockwise, right?
I'm going to stop doing what I did to lose all the other games, which was second guessing myself, and I'm going to say John.
And
Dude, your second answer was... No, I'm just kidding.
so that means it's my turn.
I'm not playing against myself.
Okay,
And
yeah,
Kenny's
that
surfing
was-
porn, so we are stuck with the four of us.
That was Sir Isaac Newton.
Sir Isaac Newton. You're not guessing. You're telling
Oh yeah,
me.
he's
I know the answer to that one.
Was Sir Isaac Newton Howard
No.
your second guess?
no.
Okay. So then that must feel somewhat good that none of the possibilities... Because it was Sir Isaac Newton,
Okay.
by the way.
I thought he was using that whole the force
Well,
trick.
you know what?
the
Jesus
droids you're looking
created
for
Sir
down here.
Isaac Newton, so I
He
was
did.
kind of
Technically.
So
Right.
all things are created. Exactly. All right. DiBiase's already up 1-0. Kat and Howard.
It's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Wait, now you guys went to school together at some point, yes?
Well, I didn't go to. I didn't. School didn't work very well for me. The
But
schedule.
you guys knew each other when you were younger?
Yeah, we knew each other when
Oh,
we were
me and
younger.
him?
Yeah.
Oh no, we never went to school together. He's way older than I am.
Yeah, way. I mean, at least 15, 20 minutes.
Wow, that was a hand gesture and everything. Way older.
I know. In fact, yeah. Okay. Howard's still alive, though, so that's good news. All right. DiBiase's up 1-0. Next quote. Belief in truth begins with doubting all that has hitherto been believed to be true. That was either Nietzsche, the German philosopher, the Dalai Lama, Eleanor Roosevelt, Jesus, or John in the book of Revelation. And Howard, what's your third guess? John Travolta? Was he one of the choices?
Repeat the question. Or repeat the quote.
The quote is, and don't be Googling answers, Kat. I just saw her get online. She's probably
Yeah, no
texting with Kenny
smartphones
right now.
allowed.
Yeah.
What kind of show did you get roped into over here? All right, the quote, repeating the quote is, belief in truth begins with doubting all that has hitherto been believed to be true.
Hitherto, that's the key.
That,
Hither.
that is, I mean,
It's
would
old- it's an old
Nietzsche
word.
say hitherto? Would the Dalai Lama say hitherto? Eleanor Roosevelt? Jesus?
I could hear Eleanor Roosevelt
Or
saying.
You
John?
can ask Hillary. She still talks to her. So
Right. Okay, I'm going to go Dalai Lama.
Okay. Dave D? Oh, yeah, if you are looking at my note, don't be looking at my
I
note.
can't see that from here.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Nietzsche.
That was my second guess.
You're going to have some freaking nightmares tonight. Kat?
I'm going to say Nietzsche too.
All right, Nietzsche people.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, that was a shot in the dark.
The second
egg.
guessing nightmare has begun, hasn't it, Howard?
Goose egg again.
Next quote. Nietzsche, German philosopher, middle to late 1800s. We've all come across his work before, whether we realize it or not. He's one of those famous guys.
Yeah, they got a bunch of T-shirts with a specific saying that.
What's one of his sayings?
Wasn't he the God is dead?
That's Richard Dawkins.
No, I thought Nietzsche has a saying about that.
Does he?
Yeah, I have to. I'll Google
He wasn't.
it.
Well, he should
I think they all
listen
do.
to his own quotes then. All right, next quote. Are we ready?
Ready.
The quote is, "There are very few human beings who received the truth, complete and staggering, by instant illumination. Most of them acquire it fragment by fragment, on a small scale, by successive developments, cellularly. It's a laborious mosaic." That was either Aeneas Nin, author. Who's that? Ayn Rand, another female author. Winston Churchill, the Dalai Lama, and Kenny's favorite, Gandhi.
Oh, Gandhi. Jeez.
And he told us.
Here we go
He
again.
told us there was a Gandhi this week.
Or was I preemptively
I don't know.
causing you to have
Yes.
sweats tonight in your sleep?
Who's first?
Cat.
Ugh. All right, I'm going to say Ayn Rand.
Interesting.
Choices again?
Ayn Rand, Aeneas Nin, Winston Churchill, Dalai Lama, and Gandhi.
I'm going to say Winston Churchill and hate myself.
What was I'm just curious what your second guess was.
Gandhi.
Yeah, I'm also going to choose Rand.
Goose eggs across the board. It was Aeneas Nin.
Yeah, well, I don't feel bad about
French-Cuban author,
Bless you,
writer. She died in 1977. She was in the... spent most of her time in the United States, though.
Oh, right. Not really. Who knows who that is?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, are you serious? Who is this? Who's this Mark Twain guy you guys keep referring to?
Well, comparing Mark Twain to Aeneas Nin, I think, is probably a stretch.
Well, okay.
Yeah, maybe.
You had heard of the other people, right?
Yeah.
Winston who? All right, next quote.
Dolly, what?
I'll do better, man. I only had 20 minutes to prep for this one today. The quote is, "An intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge." That's either from the book of Luke, the book of Proverbs.
I hate when he gives me 2 books.
Hang on one second. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Stephen Covey from Franklin Covey.
Yeah. Mark
Like
Twain.
7 minutes to success, I believe, or something along those
7
lines.
Habits of Highly
And
Effective People.
the last choice is Tony Robbins.
I love Tony.
I've heard of all of these guys.
Book of Luke for the square.
Repeat the quote again.
I just smelled this microphone. It smells like the whole place smells like a locker room today. I don't know if you guys got that.
No.
All of you folks.
It's this new Febreze I got before you got here.
Yeah, it's called O'Day Locker Room. An intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Proverbs, Luke, Dale Carnegie, Stephen Covey, Tony Robbins.
Proverbs.
I don't know. I'll say Proverbs.
Okay, what was your second guess, Howard?
Proverb.
You got to be sticking with the second guesses because it was Book of Proverbs, 1815.
He can read the screen.
I cannot. I gave it away because that's how Proverbs
I can
reads.
barely read the screen. If you can read the screen, I'm
Yeah.
impressed.
The whole complete idea is like in 2 or 3 sentences. It kind of gave it away.
All right. Okay, then how about this one, studs? A man should search for what is, not what he believes should be. MLK, JFK, Aristotle, Newton, Sir Isaac, or Einstein. Who's this Albert Einstein fellow he keeps referring to? Kat, I think you're up.
It's either MLK or Einstein, or who is the other one of the last two?
I don't remember what order I read them.
Okay.
The choices are MLK, JFK, Aristotle, Newton, or Einstein.
I think it's either Newton, Einstein.
It's definitely one
Or
of the
JFK
five.
or Aristotle. And what was the other one that was a possibility?
No.
Book of Isaiah.
It is not John Travolta.
Well, say the first one again. I'm so sorry.
Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy.
I'm gonna go with Martin Luther King.
Okay. Howie,
Aristotle.
what was your? I'm just curious what your second guess was.
I don't have a second guess.
But if you were to make a
Book
second,
of Isaiah.
okay.
The book of Proverbs. No, I say Aristotle as well.
It was Einstein,
Ah,
and that quote was in a movie that you guys helped produce. So there's that.
yeah, boy.
I never made any of the screenings. I was always working.
Did anyone get that one right, or was it another set of goose eggs?
That was a goose.
I was goose eggs.
Okay, I got 2 bonus questions. Should I do them?
Sure.
We have time. Go ahead.
Quote is: those who are able to see beyond the shadows and lies of their culture.
These were double points.
We can have them worth. We can make it worth a beer. Right. Well, you're buying beers as of now. It's going to take
It doesn't-
a
yeah.
miracle, a
Man.
milagro. Those who are able to see beyond the shadows and lies of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed by the masses. Plato, Aristotle, Jesus, Galileo, or J. Edgar Hoover.
Plato.
What's your second guess?
Aristotle.
Say J. Edgar Hoover.
I was gonna say Hoover. Yeah.
Howard, you're back in the game. It was
Wow.
Plato.
And that's double points, by the way.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Dave
I
D
how you threw
can't
that in there.
lose.
Unless anybody got it but me.
No, you got it.
This one's sort of a layup, I think. Well, it's all based on what we've been exposed to.
Yeah, bring up a few more Cuban female authors.
I'm going to do Chinese this time.
Okay. Female Chinese author.
I might have a chance. I might have a chance.
Yeah, right. Dave's connected.
Oh, then you'll get this. All warfare is based on deception. That was either in the memoirs of MacArthur, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, Sun Tzu, or Hitler.
Sun Tzu.
Dang. Good choices, by the way.
Or my ex-wife. Just kidding.
No, I'm gonna go.
I'm just
with,
kidding, honey. It's just a joke.
I'll go with the same one, Sun Tzu.
I think so too.
Sun Tzu's right.
Art of War.
From his book, The Art of
The
War.
Art of War. Yep.
Chinese military general strategist, about 500 BC.
Mm.
Very famous still
Keep
today.
your friends close and your enemies closer.
Is that one of his? It could have been a quote by Gordon Gekko. No, by Charles. What was his? Bud Fox.
Yeah, Bud Fox. It probably
I'm
was.
going to make you rich, Bud Fox. All right, that I believe ends our quote segment. You guys all got that one. Impressive.
So
The
how do we
final
end up?
scores are Dave D. You're like the top man in the totem
Yeah,
pole
he's-
typically week
I'm
to
digging
week.
it, man. I'll accept that.
Or your eyes are better than what you're leading
No,
us to believe.
I got one wrong, so I wasn't fully cheating. Or that could have
Cathryn?
been a trick.
On your rookie,
I'm a
performance
vet and
tonight.
She kills me.
you killed Howard. Howard's going to be having second-guessing nightmare sweats tonight. We'll pray for him. And I believe that closes out this segment. Oh, and to make it official, then I guess Howard's buying us drinks?
Or he'll go, oh, I gotta go.
Oh, I was going to buy socks tonight.
getting-
I got to get out of
You
here.
know.
Yeah, I gotta.
Yeah.
Gotta clean the bathroom.
Why don't you tell us, why did we bring Kat here? There's a specific reason, because she knows something.
There is a specific reason why we brought Kat, because as we were doing last week's show, we got off on a couple tangents, which happens, and they were very interesting. We were kind of all feeding each other information, and we touched on the. Well, it started out with the missing children, with just the staggering numbers.
I listened to it. I think it started out with Prince.
Well,
It's funny how you get from Prince to.
We
no,
do,
I mean
we do
it's-
that a lot.
Yeah, it's always starts one place and
I
ends.
was going
in
to say, we
another.
went off on a tangent. Last week was our first freeform show where we had like no preset top. We were just going to see where it took us.
Yeah, we should call it down the ADD hole.
Yeah,
That was not to be offensive by any means.
but as we got, it seemed like what resonated with us was we were all shocked by the numbers we were coming up with missing children, and then you brought up some interesting facts into it that led us basically to human trafficking. And as we were walking out of here, DiBiase and I were like, "This is insane. We got to look into this more." I mean, we stood outside, we talked about it. We were very troubled by this.
Yeah, I thought this was something that happened in Cambodia or the Ukraine.
Yeah, I
or
mean,
Bangkok
I know
or
about
something
human
like that,
trafficking,
not
but in the United States, let alone, as he mentioned, saying that I-275 is a major corridor. I mean, Dave and I both have kids, and I-275 is between us. And they're saying that's a major artery. I mean, that just, it's flabbergasting to me. It just blows me away. I can't believe that stuff's happening in Canton.
Maybe it's not a coincidence that you two live so close to each other.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe we begin an investigation at Howard and Dave's house.
Could be.
Well, you know my kid's mine, because that poor kid doesn't look like anybody but me. But so it led me. I wanted to figure out somebody to call. I was trying to gather more information because he and I were texting and talking about it, and we wanted to make a topic, a future topic on human trafficking. And I all of a sudden just popped in my head that my good friend Kat and I, we've been talking. She brought human trafficking into my wheelhouse about a year ago.
Trafficking into our lives.
She came by with a van full of kids, and she's like, no. But she brought it to my attention it was about a year ago, right?
Yeah, actually about a year and a half.
About a year ago, because she had started displaying the human trafficking logo, the Stop Human Trafficking logo. Sorry. I mean, they're different logos.
Yeah, we're not in the business of human trafficking.
Her business
Make that
is
very
not
clear.
human trafficking.
No, it's not.
But she wanted the Stop Human Trafficking logo placed on some of the literature that I print for her company. And we got it all worked out and squared away. And then as we were doing it, she explained to me what was going on. And I'm like, wow, that's just insane. And then, I got distracted by everyday life, and it kind of resonated in the back of my head, but it wasn't something I thought about often. So it popped into my head that, well, Kat knows a bunch about this. So I'll text her and see if she can point me in the direction of an organization, somebody I could contact, somebody she knows. And as we started talking, I realized I don't need to look any farther because she's more well-versed than we usually are before we start a show on any particular topic. And so I asked her if she was available. And on short notice, she's like, heck yeah, I'll come in and talk about it. She's very passionate about it. And
yeah, I'm already reading your notes on here.
yeah,
Kat.
she brought in better notes than I did.
Fantastic. How did you get interested in this topic to begin with?
Wow, well, it was in 2013. I was with a dear friend of mine, and we were sitting at a restaurant. Her sister is a Michigan State trooper, and she was driving from Lansing back to Canton from a conference, and so she wanted to stop and grab a bite to eat. And the conference that she was at was about human trafficking, and she started talking about it. And like you had mentioned earlier, I thought, human trafficking, what in the world? Is why would she, a Michigan State trooper, be interested in human trafficking? It didn't make any sense to me. Then she started to tell me about some of the cases and that it was going on not just in Michigan, but right here, like in Canton, right in the surrounding area. And I remember I drove home and I thought, oh, my God, God, you need to do something about this. I mean, this is insane. I can't believe that this is even happening in our country, in our culture today, And it really, really bothered me. And I started to pray a lot about it. And about a week later, another good friend of mine, I told her the story. And another friend of mine sent me an email about a human trafficking awareness night that was going on at a local church. And so her and I decided to go. And there was a woman there named Teresa Flores who shared her story, and it just disturbed me to my very core. And in the process of being there, after the event wrapped up, there was a woman who I used to work with a beautiful, wonderful, wonderful woman. Her name is Senator Laura Toy. I used to work for her when I worked in politics. She was at the event. She's a huge advocate for, obviously in combating all this. And it was the weirdest thing, because you would think that she, being the only person in that moment that I knew, that I would walk up to her. But instead, I felt compelled to walk up to this other girl who was just standing there. She was wearing a hoodie. And I just felt compelled to give her my business card. I didn't know why at the time. And, I told her that I owned a trivia company. And I remember thinking to myself that's got to just sound absolutely ridiculous.
It's got to sound trivial.
Exactly. And she looked at me kind of like, is this a joke? Like, but thank you. And she was very gracious. And that was it. A month later, she reached out to me and we had breakfast. And we also met with a woman who works for Monarch Ministries, which is another organization dedicated towards this issue. And she proceeded to share her story, her personal story. She had been...
so she was at this conference as a victim.
Actually, as a survivor. It's really important that we recognize these women who have gotten out of that. They are survivors because they've been literally through hell, and these stories are just so heart-wrenching. And to know that it's happening right here, and this is everybody's problem. If you know a child or if you love a child, then you need to be aware of this. It's that critical.
That's one thing I found that was surprising is that so I had all these preformed images in my head that this is an overseas problem. And then once I realized this is actually something that's happening, not just, a little bit in the U.S., this is pervasive here in the United States. Then my stereotyping self kicked in, and then I started thinking, well, why isn't the media covering it? Is this just a problem in the black community But I came to realize this is, it's hard to build a profile. They're all over the place. It's the Johns are that are, well, I don't want to get too far into it, but on the survivor side are the people that are in captivity of some sort, and that doesn't necessarily mean being chained up. It could also be very much a mental captivity, which to some degree I do believe we're all incarcerated by that in some way. But they were from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, different demographics.
Yeah, one of the things that really shocked me was, as I was looking into it, they were saying that there's a big problem on the west side of the state, and that it was outside of Grand Rapids in the rural communities. And I can't, unfortunately, I can't come up with the name of the city, but it was one of those cities you hear of. And I'm like, really? There's big human trafficking going on over there? And they were running down the list of, who at least in that particular area the average John was, and he was Joe, 28 to 55, married with kids, bored, and I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Howard, we're sitting 3 miles away from one of the most brutal traffickers, and I am so sorry I cannot remember his name, so I don't want to get too much into his story and be inaccurate, but he would...
why not? We do it all the time.
Accuracy. What? Just make up a name.
I see you skipped over this part right here.
Oh yeah, no, we're
oh, the corrections from last week?
we'll get back to that in a second.
But
so what was this girl's story?
My point is it's everywhere.
What was what was this girl's story?
Well, her first exposure to, anything sex related was through her brother, who is 10 years older than her. He showed her pornography at a very young age, and it freaked her out. And she went to her mom and told her mom, and her mom told her basically, just to deal with it, kind of brushed it off. By the time she turned 13, her brother was addicted to heroin. And again, he was 10 years older than her. And he decided that he was going to sell her for heroin. And she was 13 years old. She She didn't know any better. She really didn't. And she thought what was happening to her was normal. Now, eventually she got out of it. She was in it for about 3 years. At one point, the police came and raided a house that she was at. And she was in a back bedroom with an adult man's T-shirt on. And that's all she had on.
They
And
probably arrested her, I'm guessing.
well, they walked back there and they asked her what she was doing, and she was terrified. I mean, and she couldn't say anything. And they said, "Do you live here?" And she said, "No, I live down the street." And they said, "Get out of here, go home." So now that was authority figure number 2 in a sexual kind of situation where a blind eye was taken, right?
Well, they're more interested in the drugs.
And so, the only reason why her trafficking stopped was because her brother decided to get help, and he took off, and he checked into a rehab center on the west side of the state. And again, she didn't understand the term trafficking. She didn't understand really that was wrong, and so she just got caught up in gang-related activity and drugs and becoming parts of gangs and getting sexed into gangs. I mean, it was just normal for her. So it wasn't until she was at a party, and she, this was later on when she was in high school, and she fell into a swimming pool, and this guy, pulled her out of a pool. And
Metaphorical symbolism.
Yeah. Well, and she ended up marrying this guy, and they ended up having 3 kids. She went to school. She started to go to nursing school, and she also started working. Well, no, wait, she didn't do that at that time. But anyways, she ended up one day she got invited to go to an awareness night about human trafficking with a friend, and she went with this woman. And she started listening to this woman's testimony and thought, oh, my gosh, I mean, this is exactly what happened to me. And she didn't know what disturbed her more, was that all this was resurfacing, or that there was an actual term for it, that it was common, that this happens to people.
How old was she at that point?
You know what? In the interest of being accurate, I don't want to say. I know she's in her 20s. She's in her very early 20s at this point.
Right now?
Oh, right now she's in her 30s.
Okay, so you're thinking she's in her early 20s at this point. So this went on from the time she was 13.
Yes.
Until she had kids?
Until she
had
kids.
Right, and got married. She married.
And
she had 3 children.
And she had no idea.
Right. She just had no clue. Now, here's the kind of a side note, little twist to the story.
That is so sad that she grew up in an environment with her parents. I mean, there is a parent there, at least one. She grew up in an environment where she didn't think that was out of the ordinary.
Well, and here's the thing: a lot of these, a lot of parents kind of turn. If you listen to girls who have been trafficked and still live at home while they're being trafficked, I mean, it's very common. Teresa Flores is a classic example of that, and we can talk about her story a little bit later. But what you'll see is these are the kind of parents who just really don't pay that much attention to their kids. They don't, really
or they're
involve
single.
themselves.
They're
in
single
their
parents.
Or they're single, single parents for sure. But where were we back with?
Well, the
with
testimonies that I'd probably listened to 20 testimonies, and there were some common denominators that seemed to apply to almost all of them. And we've all, well, maybe not, but if you've seen the movie Taken, who's the guy that's in that movie?
Liam
Liam
Neeson.
Neeson.
Thank you.
I have a very special set of skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, we get this impression that it's done by strange guys. You just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It doesn't seem to be that way. Most of the people that were giving testimonies were pulled into it, and now you're another one that I just
by an
heard.
acquaintance, by somebody they knew.
Right. Very often it's a family member, an uncle that's on drugs, or that has gotten involved with a cult. That's what, going to the corrections from last week's segment, which we blew past it. I said it was Paul Bonacio, but it's Paul Bonacci.
Yeah, Paul Bonacci.
Look him up. That story
And,
It'll tell you how deep this rabbit hole
and the
goes.
easiest
on
way,
this.
if you don't find Benassi, David also mentioned the paperboy from Iowa.
Yeah, what was his name?
His name is Johnny Gosch, Gosch.
And they think he's now in the White House.
In the White House.
Now think about that. And
Go to that,
this was
go to
happening,
that
the
website.
White House
if
was.
you don't eat lunch, don't eat your lunch first, go to Johnny Gosch's website. It's just sickening.
His website? You mean it's like.
It's basically his story. Because with him, a couple years after he was abducted, as his mother started this huge campaign, wrote a book. She would not. She was not going to deal with the fact that her son was abducted. Another silly trivia note: he was also the first kid ever on a milk carton. So Johnny Gosch was the first one ever on a milk carton, and his mother was passionate about trying to find her son. And
now she was sincere in this.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
She had the brakes being put on by the local, not just one, but several local police officers.
Yes.
And would later find out it was her own husband, again, inside the family,
Yep.
that arranged it. And I think he was involved in some demonic occults that needed.
Right.
And they're
But so within a couple of years, she started getting pictures mailed to her of children that were part of this famous Nebraska
SNL
scandal, trafficking, child trafficking, child pornography ring. Boys Town was linked into all this, and
put the links together for all you listeners out there. Here again, now we're talking about bankers. We're talking about evil, and we're talking about.
And this leads right into the Reagan, my probably favorite president of the last several decades, right into the Reagan White House, and is linked to Bush Sr.
Yeah. No, the Bush Sr. at the
Bush Sr. was the link.
Right. President of the United States was involved in this. Not like he
When he was vice president.
Not like he just shielded his eyes from something.
Oh no, he credentialed. He gave press credentials to one of these guys so that he could move freely around the White House.
The Gosch kid and the photographer in the White House, do we know with certainty if they are one and the same person? Because there was some question about that.
I do not believe they are one and the same.
Okay.
But so with Johnny's mom, she started getting people giving her pictures of, and they were graphic. Some of them were very graphic. There are the tamest of the tame are on that website as examples. And they started sending her pictures of kids they thought might be Johnny. And she's got several of them up there. Several look like him. She says it's not him, but there are a bunch that are him. And this started happening over a several-year period. She hired her own investigators. They tried to track him down. She was completely deterred by local law enforcement. And then eventually there was a breakthrough, and there was this guy from the UK that was busted in a child pornography sting. And all of a sudden, all this stuff is out in the open. Now, she says that a few years after that, a man with long hair came to her front door with another man with shorter hair. And that this man claimed to be her son. And he's told her, you got to stop looking for me. You're going to get yourself in trouble. You got to stop. I'm alive. I'm okay. Deal with it. Which made her go even harder at it. It's incredible.
What blows my mind the most on this, and it's since we started talking about it, and that's what I was really interested in asking Kat about, is what I can't get my head wrapped around here is the real dynamic behind all this. So you have this, it's obviously a marketplace, correct?
Oh, it's all about the money. If you look at the statistics, human trafficking is a $32 billion global industry.
So being someone myself who's been in some form of business my whole career, mostly on the technical side, I'm not like a sales guy or a business person per se, but I understand business. So what I can't quite grasp is who's the buyer here? Who are the buyers? How does this even come about?
Well, it's interesting because events like the Super Bowl, the auto show, anything that draws an international audience, that's your market. And you guys were, I know you were, excuse me, joking around about Backpage.com, but I mean, that's one of the biggest avenues that traffickers use.
Something like that.
Backpage.com.
Specifically.
Well, that's specific. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to shut that down.
Yeah, so
it's crazy because if you look at, if you notice an event that is going to draw an international audience, go to Backpage.com. Go to the adult part. I'm not advising that anybody do this, but I mean, if you don't believe me, check it out. Look at how many girls are on there, I don't know, 2 months before an event like that. Go back a month before. Go back a week before. And then start looking in the paper.
Yeah, because you got a lot of
girls
people
that are
from
going missing.
A lot of people in from out of town, etc.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, you got to have money to travel to it, so you got a bunch of money on you.
well, it's like I don't want to compare it to anything like that. I was going to go somewhere with it, but I think I get what you're saying is that they create. The demand exists, right? Mm-hmm. So they create the supply. Right. But who? I guess the hard part for me, because I see this stat here, is that an average age of children that are at risk are from 11 to 14. And what this reminds me of is what Russ Dizdar terms as SRA, which is satanic ritual abuse. And clearly, being that this is so convoluted, you can't put your finger on any one thing, and it just seems like it's everywhere all the time. I think it's clear that's probably what this is, whether the people involved in it are willing participants or just going along with it. Mm-hmm. But it just blows my mind. I mean, this isn't this isn't what I think of when I think of prostitution. Right? I mean, this is very different. Not condoning prostitution, but normally you think of prostitution.
Well,
it's like it's a
two
business
willing
arrangement.
participants.
Supply and demand.
But you guys
yeah.
have to understand too that there are a lot of girls that get trafficked that are used by pimps. They're coerced. I mean, if you are coerced and being held against your will and being sold for sex, you're being trafficked. You're being sex trafficked. It doesn't matter if it's by a pimp on the street. It doesn't matter if it's by answering an ad and meeting at a hotel room. It doesn't matter.
And you said against your will. Most of the and it's mostly women, girls that are targeted. You had said something. Against their will. Most of them they come from abusive households. Right. They are. They don't have confidence. They exude this vulnerability when they. Yeah. These types of criminals don't go after large groups of people. They don't go after people that look strong, that walk confident.
They're not going after the valedictorian.
Well, let me paint a little picture for you. You have 3 girls hanging out together. And typically, you do see that dynamic, girls hanging out in groups of 3s, particularly adolescent girls. You have the popular girl, okay? And then you have the girl who gets along with everybody. She's kind of the middle-of-the-road girl. And then you have the girl that isn't very popular, but, the middle-of-the-road girl has convinced the popular girl that, she's cool enough to let her in to the little circle, right? And so usually that's kind of the dynamic that you see.
I'm wondering, Dave, which one were you growing up?
I'm talking about girls.
I know. Okay, look, I sometimes want to make these shows light because we deal with such heavy topics. It's not to actually undermine how much we care about this.
Dave was the popular girl.
Never the popular girl.
All right. I'll stop my joke telling.
So anyways, so you've got these 3 girls and they're at the mall, okay? And, maybe the popular girl and the middle-of-the-road girl, they're off talking to boys. Or they're in the store and they can afford to buy a brand new purse, but the girl without the self-esteem, for whatever reason, can't. Or boys aren't talking to her because she doesn't have that self-esteem. So now what you have is you have a recruiter who's being paid by some sort of employer or a pimp or somebody like that to watch for a girl like that. And it's usually a good-looking kid, especially if you're talking about teenage girls, right? They're not going to send, a 50-year-old man to approach a girl like that. It's going to be the boy
they get
next
kids
door.
and they get young boys and young girls to recruit them. That was another thing.
Well, oftentimes aren't those victims of trafficking themselves?
Yeah.
Oftentimes the ones that turn out to be the pimps, the recruiters, that they were once trafficked.
Sometimes, though, the recruiter doesn't know what's going on.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I would imagine in a case like we just talked about, like the boy next door, there are situations where the kid might not understand fully, or maybe they're not being upfront with that kid about what the girl or what's going to happen with the girl. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that, but
yeah, me too.
Well, but you have circumstances like, hey, I'm going to pay you to recruit girls to work at my restaurant in the United States, and you live in Romania.
That's different. Yeah.
That's
okay.
That's what
Okay,
I mean.
yeah.
That I can buy.
If we're not talking about the United States, okay.
That I can buy. It's insane.
You got some interesting statistics here. What are some of the ones that to you are eye-opening? I've got a couple that I want to throw out as well, but I want to hear what the ones that impress you.
Well, the first one that Michigan is ranked number 2 behind Nevada. I mean,
yeah. So Nevada's number 1. I take it.
And I think everybody can kind of understand Nevada. Being number 1 with prostitution is legal in some areas of Nevada, so it makes sense. Just because there's a girl, by the way, we talked about this a little bit before we went on the air. Just because a girl is working in a place prostituting herself where it's legal doesn't mean she's there of her own free will.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to talk about because a question it's my old naive self talking, which is why don't they just walk out? But you have to understand, like, they are kept in a state of it's almost like a constant, not overwhelming fear, but a fear of doing something against their captors. And then you've got trauma bonding and the Stockholm syndrome.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that is a known
for some
psychological fact that some people fall in love with their
that's where I was going to go, because for them it even though it's twisted and wrong, those moments when they show them compassion, when they're nice to them, when they treat them nicely, when they give them attention, that may be the first kind of positive attention that kid
by
gets.
getting someone that has low self-esteem to begin with, then you've really got on a great carrot and stick routine where it is hard to break out of. I mean, we've all been in ruts before. We've all been in places we shouldn't have been. And imagine you put a young girl, a 13-year-old, 14, 15-year-old girl, you expose her to that.
Right, not emotionally, not intellectually developed.
And by the time she is developed, that's now been her, like, teenage years.
Right.
It's now somewhat normal to her. She's still alive. She's still breathing. But typically they are kept devoid of resources, from clothes to food and to money. It's not like they can just call a cab company and say, hey, come get me. They are truly reliant on their...
Well, here's what you have to understand. What happens is it is so psychologically traumatic what these girls go through. I mean, they're obtained somehow. Okay, it doesn't matter. They're taken against their will somehow, and they're put in a situation where if they don't listen, they're going to get physically beaten. And then they're going to get raped, and physically beaten, and raped, and physically beaten, and raped.
Or killed. And they've witnessed this happen to others,
or
which is part
or
of
their
the...
family's going to be killed.
Right.
That's another trick that's used.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
They'll find out the only ones in the family that were ever nice to them, and those are the ones that they're going to be threatened constantly.
And so, so what happens is the girl starts to, and I'm not a psychologist, but the girl starts to create a second identity. Okay,
The one that
the
can-
one that can deal with it, and so
And that's the
you
SRA
might
link
see
you were talking
about.
that girl on the street prostituting herself, and wow, she looks like she really wants to be doing that. Her pimp is, has her within eyesight, and she knows that. She knows it, and so, I read somewhere that pimps oftentimes will give them a new name once they take on that identity, and can even bring
Exactly.
that identity forth by calling them that name. I mean, it's really, really crazy.
Right, one of the two of you mentioned, asked the question, how do we not realize it's like this? We have this specific picture of prostitution, and it's nothing like this. The answer is Pretty Woman. They pulled the same thing on us that they've pulled with all these other things, these other topics we talk about. They put Pretty Women out there. So the picture we have of prostitution in America is just a chick who's down on her luck turning tricks, and she's going to meet a rich guy and live happily ever after. And
Right.
these girls see that like these Disney princess movies, and they want to emulate that.
Well, there's a girl who's actually a leading advocate against human trafficking in Las Vegas, and her ministry, she believes in Jesus. She claims that Jesus came to her when she was in a situation where it was apparent to her that she was going to die, and now she's devoted her life to Christ, and she's on the street witnessing to prostitutes and sharing the truth, about human trafficking, and she freely admits when she shares her story that, I saw Pretty Woman, and I wanted to be just like her, and and she ended up within inches of her life, terrorized by a group of men for years.
You asked her about the stats. I'm reading through this, and that's like the third or fourth time. And this one just keeps jumping off the page at me, mainly because I can kind of relate to it, being that I'm a father.
Yeah, 11 to 14, right?
No, almost half of the human trafficking cases involve children being sexually exploited. This is especially heinous in my eyes. Not saying the other isn't. This is just especially.
Yeah, right.
I'm with you. Like,
God,
there's there is a fetish almost. Well, it is a fetish, I think, for this Lolita type. Now, I'm not going to say whether I've surfed porn or not, but let's just hypothetically say I have. If I ever came across websites that had, sometimes, if you hypothetically do that kind of thing, you will see pictures of people that just, they must look like they're 12 years old. And I, hypothetically speaking, get scared. I'm like, I don't even want to be I don't
Just in
keep
case.
me moving, whatever. This is
what?
in my old former life.
When you look at the ads on Backpage.com, the traffickers even have, kind of code words they use to indicate if a girl is under the age of 18, and they describe her like a piece of produce. They use words like new and fresh, and it's disgusting.
So there's actually coined terms that they use. So you could decode this and say, okay, this girl's underage.
That's what has been true in some of those ads that
Yeah,
police have.
was listening to a couple of busts that were done by sting operations, was recorded, and they've got a bunch of Johns. John is it's the catch-all term for a client of a prostitute, not a guy named John. And all of them,
Oh, there are
I'm
Johns
sure there were a
named
couple
John, I'm
Johns
sure.
in there.
I don't know about John's.
It was obvious these guys knew what they were renting. And I don't want to say sell is like a permanent type of transaction. Really, this should be called more not like these girls are being rented out for sex, and it's usually girls. And the clientele, it was from all walks of life, but typically what I was seeing was more white businessmen in suits than almost anything else. Professional guys that obviously know what they're getting involved in. And that was the part that was disturbing for me. And a lot of these guys are also... So Super Bowl 48. This was a couple years ago in New York. And there was a sting there they had actually arrested 45 guys that were pimps. They were, the controllers of the girls. They ended up saving 16 girls that were between the ages of 13 and 17. And these girls were there in New York. Most of them had traveled from out of state for this event, because that is a common way that this is done. Because you get the traveling business guy that's looking for, I'm away from my wife and kid, whatever, I need to entertain. They call into a service, and the next thing you know, some pretty young girls showing up at your door. That all, that's common, obviously, because this is a big business. I mean, in the U.S. alone, sex trafficking last year brought in $33 billion was the number I got. I'm sorry, U.S. would have been half that, $16 billion, $33 billion across the globe. That's bigger than...
But we make up half.
Yeah, at least. Probably even more so. We're off the charts on wants and desires as a country, and we've got right now still the money to do it. That won't be lasting very long, but one guy was talking about how if he were to buy a new fresh quote unquote recruit for $10,000, and this is more of an extreme type of example. It's much more common. I'm giving you some big highlights here. I wouldn't say this is the common scenario, but if she's pretty and young, he was bragging that he would make his money back in the first week. In fact, I actually have a quote from him. The guy's name is Ludwig Tarzan Bainberg, and he's a convicted trafficker. Basically,
is that his real name?
Yeah. He barely missed out on our quotes game today. But
Ludwig Tarzan Bainberg.
I mean, if you don't, the minute I see the guy's name, I'm like, honey, you got to stay away. I mean, I don't want to just leave it with where's the problem. I want to make sure we save time to how to identify this in your kids.
Right.
Some things we can do. And I know we're getting close to a
break.
We'll
get to
Howard,
that.
Do we want to?
We're about 2 minutes out of a break, so you can finish up that thought, and then we'll come back after the break and get some organizations. And
so Tarzan, Ludwig Bainberg, was bragging that in 1 week he can rent out a girl enough to recapture his $10,000 investment. Another way to look at it is on average. Now, this was an average according to a 2003 Netherlands study, and that is a single sex slave can earn, we call them pimps, handlers, controllers, whatever you want. Single sex slave can earn $250,000 per year for her pimp. And like I said, this isn't something that I thought was, this is in the USA. And a lot of these are the kids we see on...
That's what shocked me. It's not only is it happening in the USA, it's happening here in Michigan.
Yeah, I'm not... I guess the closer something gets to home... But I can't say I said shocked. I shouldn't say shocked anymore. Nothing shocks me anymore. In fact...
I don't know. Trust me, there are a lot of things I think about Canton, and it's just... I don't think that.
Or maybe that's why.
Let me just share something, and just I'm not going to use names, but not too long ago, there was a 16-year-old girl who played a sport at a very local high school and broke a bone. Okay, and she was unable to play that sport. The doctor gave her Vicodin. Okay, and she got hooked on it, and he gave her more Vicodin. And then he cut her off the Vicodin. Well, she started looking elsewhere to get Vicodin and came across other drugs. And, hey, use this, in place of that. She's on the streets of Detroit as a prostitute right now. I mean...
Now, and this is more than random chance. Because when you really look at how our medical system operates, and it's not that this doctor is per se an evil doctor. He's just prescribing. He's just doing what he was taught to do. But go look at who owns the drug companies and what really goes on behind the scenes. And when you start to realize it is part of this massive coordinated system, and there are so many little fishnets that capture people, this young little girl, she got caught in this particular net, and right now sounds like she's a lost soul, and all we can do, I guess, is pray for her.
We're gonna have to pray for her. that's what we can do now.
So we have a break, right?
Okay, welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. We've got Dave, David, and Howard, our special in-studio guest, Cathryn. Is here to talk to us about a subject that she is very passionate about, and we are all becoming passionate about as we found out about it, which is human trafficking. And there was a couple of things during the break that Kat said she really wanted to make sure to get on this segment. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to her for a second because there was a point she really wanted to make, and I'm going to let her do that real quick before we start bombing her with questions again.
I just wanted to make it clear. There are a ton of individuals that I know and a ton of organizations that are out there every day that have devoted 100% of their life, their livelihood, their time, their talent, their money to this cause. And I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that I am one of those people. This issue became very, very personal to me because of somebody that I knew that was very close to me. And I learned a lot. And so I still do absolutely have a heart for it and am 100% behind all these organizations and do, the things that I can to help out. But I just didn't want to come across as I was, there's a million other people that should be sitting in this chair before me. So
yeah, a couple of the organizations that you spoke to me about were AWOL, All Worthy of Love.
Absolutely.
And they are at allworthyoflove.org. And they're basically rescuing children on the streets of Detroit, our own beloved city. And they're doing it in Jesus' name. So thank God for the work they're doing. And another one was SOAP, which is Save Our Adolescents from Prostitutions. And that is at Traffic, spelled TRAFFICK, free.com. And that is the organization that Teresa Flores, the lady you mentioned at the top of the hour, the organization that she started. So check those links out if you want more information on that, and we'll have some more information on that as well. So where were we, guys?
Since you're going through those organizations real quick, I want to ask, is the State of Michigan Human Trafficking Task Force a law enforcement wing?
No, that is through Michigan State University.
Oh.
Yeah. If you go to the Attorney General's website, it has all the information. I believe there's, he's got an inner task force, but there's also the there is a Michigan State Police Task Force.
Right.
But then there's also a Michigan State Human Trafficking Task Force.
I was just curious about that.
And that's through Michigan State University.
Yeah, I actually put a little profile of how this works because, that the dynamics behind it, when you understand how it works, then you can stop it. And it's really the crux of this show is understanding what kind of beast we're up against so that we're not lured or tricked by the deception that they count on in most people. But I know that these are some of the characteristics that would be in like I think you'd use the term vulnerable, or they're in a higher vulnerability bracket, I guess, for lack of a better word. People that have drug users in the family. You mentioned your story, and that, I didn't even heard that story before I already had this note. Children of single parents, usually single mothers. Girls that are alone or traveling in small groups. You're safer, obviously, in big groups. They also target social media. Girls that complain about their mothers on social media. That was very specific, that several of them, a few of the testimonies, some girl says, I hate my mom today. And then some boy reaches out or some girl reaches out, befriends them. Let's get out, let's run away or let's get out of here. That's one of the ways they get into this.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was a big problem with that in the late 90s with America Online because AOL used to have, personal ads. Basically just, people looking for friends. It's pretty much innocent stuff, but because at that time there was no Like Facebook, I believe you have to be 18 or have your parents' permission. You have to be a certain age to have a Facebook page, right? Or you have
I don't know. You can fake it, I'm sure.
I'm sure you can, but I know with AOL there was I remember reading some stories that there were issues with it because they were targeting teenage girls with these personal ads, or sometimes the teenage girls were, looking for father figures or whatever to replace what was missing in their life, and they would contact these guys.
That's one thing that I thought was really interesting. Was I got a lot of information from TED Talks. You guys familiar with TED?
TED, yes.
So there were a bunch of survivors that were on there telling their stories, and their story, really it's an amalgamation of all the statistics we're throwing out there. That this is sort of the profile of each one of them. And they've actually done a lot to change laws, and this is something that's evolving as we speak. But up until even just a few years ago, because prosecutors apparently don't like to prosecute these types of criminals, because the term I heard a few times was that they don't think they can ever get a complete jury to view them as anything more than willing participants. Like they don't see where the crime is, because typically the captive herself, and I'm going to use her because it's typically girls, they themselves don't want to get caught. They're taught that
right.
You've just been part of a crime now. Now you need to keep quiet. You need to protect yourself
They
now
can
too.
throw you in jail too.
Exactly. And when money is exchanged, like typically you think if you have sex with a 14-year-old girl, like that's just statutory rape, basically. In my mind, there is under no condition in the United States I can think of where you're having sex with a girl that's, let's say, below 17 years old, unless there's some states that have some 16-year-old adult, break-even point. If you're having, the minute that happens, intuitively as a citizen of this country, I'm thinking, all right, this John needs to be on trial for rape. But the funny thing is they're actually protected by an exchange of money, because when their money is exchanged, even when
Does that imply consent?
it implies that it's a different type of crime. It is now it's a prostitution crime, which gets someone caught, a slap on the wrist, and they're home that night, and there's nothing. It doesn't disrupt their lives at all. It's just a little embarrassing if it gets out. And a lot of police officers actually sort of help this quote unquote system, often doing what happened to your friend, where all she was wearing a shirt, obviously underage, and the officer says, just go home. Not realizing that he had a chance to save someone, but untrained,
Right.
And in some cases,
Probably
like
not
that
aware.
Paul Benassi case, there is actually, if you tie that together with Russ Disdar's research, there are literally, and when I say evil, I mean like out of a story book evil, that are in pretty much every single precinct in the United States. And they're typically the ones in power. I mean, those, the chief of police, which I believe is usually an elected position. Maybe that is with a sheriff.
I think it's appointed.
Okay, same thing. Appointed by someone that got elected
By an elected
using
official.
Exactly. Again, just follow the money. You always follow the money. And you tie it together like what happens to so many of these kids. I mean, we were throwing out numbers that seemed a little bit high, but the source was credible. 800,000 abductions in the U.S. in a year.
Upon further research, I found that number was closer to high 400,000s.
Yeah, okay,
which is
it's
still quite
well, still
ridiculous.
crazy.
It doesn't like, oh, that's fine then. Yeah.
It's like, oh,
It doesn't
it's
make
only
it any-
500,000. It's
Yeah.
not 3/4.
So it's obviously, I mean, that's 10,000 per state per year. That's 300 a day. I mean, 30 a day.
Yeah, it's a classroom.
Every day. In fact, one of the statistics I'd gotten was that there are 500,000 prostitution transactions conducted every day in the United States alone. Now, that is not from 500,000 different victims. That was portrayed as being 100 to 200,000, quote unquote, they're not saved yet.
yeah.
So I'm going to say victims that are multiple client.
Yeah.
And so typically, and I saw some 13-year-old girls in chains because they were under arrest themselves. And so the laws that we had, and I will say it does seem like it's evolving. And Kat, you told a story about a guy who's now in jail. He got the max.
Yeah, well, yeah. Separate from that, though, there was a big victory for this. There's a woman named Teresa Flores who I mentioned earlier, and her story can be found in a book called "The Slave Across the Street." The chapters in the book are just a few pages long because you really can't read beyond just a few pages, without probably wanting to throw up. I mean, her story is incredible, and it happened here in Michigan. And, I mean, I even got thrown off track right now. Just thinking about her story. What were you saying right before that? I'm sorry.
Well, we were talking that you said there was it was the sex slave right across the street. I mean, that's one of the things that I guess I'm going a different direction. I was talking about how they get arrested themselves.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. We were talking about the laws in Michigan. So she's the author of that book. And 3 years ago, a bill was passed called the Teresa Flores Law. And it's a 19-point piece of legislation that updates all the human trafficking laws in the state of Michigan. And you can find that at the state of Michigan's website.
Yeah, the website for the Attorney General is michigan.gov/AG. And you had an interesting little conversation with the Attorney General. You want to tell us that story?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to.
Well,
I thought that was pretty
it's
interesting.
a God story, so it's
This is the right place for
This
that.
Yeah.
you're with the right group.
I know. All right. So, this was back when I was really, really heavily involved in this issue. And I went to an awareness event where the Attorney General, Bill Schuette, was speaking, and I'd never met him before. And I walked up to him when he came.
Where was this event at?
It was actually, I think it was at the Livonia Public Library, if I recall. And I remember it was wintertime. But one of the things I recall is I was sitting there, and there was a guy sitting about 5 chairs down from me. And he was talking to somebody else, and I couldn't help but to overhear him. He said, there's all these Christians and, all these Christian groups that want to help this cause, and we just have to get them out of the equation because they're not willing to go where we need them to go, to the strip clubs and all these different places. Now,
Now willing to get dirty, huh?
a few years ago, I think I would have had a thing or two to say to the guy,
A few years ago, I might have said, I'd be willing to go and help you out.
But I just didn't say anything. And Bill walked in with a few of his, staff, and my legs, it was the first time my legs ever moved without my permission. That's the only way I can describe it. I got up and went right up to him, and I introduced myself as Cathryn. I told him I was nobody important because I certainly am not.
Yes, you are.
And I don't remember, everything that I said to him, but I just told him that this was a real problem and that there were things that I felt like he could do, to really, change things. And so I went and sat back down, and the whole time I'm thinking, I can't even believe I just made such an, what out of myself, And at the very end, he started taking questions, and I thought, okay, here's my chance to redeem myself. So I raised my hand, and he's calling on everybody around me. And he's looking right at me, and I'm thinking, I can't believe he's not going to call on me. So now I'm like, Arnold Horshack just going, woo, And finally he said, okay, so nobody else has any other questions. And I put my hand down, and I thought, wow, I can't even believe this. And I looked down to get my keys out of my purse. And he said, now I want to hand the microphone to somebody who has something she wants to share with you. And I turned around and I looked at the crowd, and they were all looking at me, and I turned back, and the Attorney General had the microphone in my face, and he said, "You're on." And I stood up, and, you know, I don't remember, again, everything that I said. I know it was a God moment. I was moved by God. But I do remember one of the things that I said was, you know, we need to go into the strip clubs. We need to go to these hotels. We need to go into these neighborhoods, into these places, because Christ called us to go to the gates of hell. And as soon as I said that, the guy 5 chairs down from me, I heard him say amen. And everybody started going, you know, going crazy over it, because it is true. As Christians, we should be the first ones brokenhearted over this. We should not be scared to face this issue. And, you know, we should all be doing our part, because it's absolutely heinous. And that word doesn't even do it justice.
No, it doesn't.
Why isn't this more popular? I mean, why isn't this...
You know, I don't know. I have thought that to myself. I do come to the conclusion that there are more people brokenhearted over the issue than there are, you know, kind of people in need. I'm not saying, you know, we were talking about numbers. One girl being treated like this is enough. That's enough. But maybe the numbers aren't high enough for, you know, the powers that be to draw attention to this. But I can tell you that there are politicians out there that are working really hard for this. Bill Schuette is one of them, and Senator Judy Emmons. I mean, she has been the champion. She's the one who wrote the legislation that updated the antiquated laws that we had. And one of the biggest things that law did was it made it so a girl who was underage, who got caught prostituting herself, she could not be charged as a criminal. She's a victim.
Yeah,
at that point.
That one surprised me that was even part of the way these cases were evaluated. Mm-hmm. Because I think if you are less than 18 and you're involved in this particular type of, there's some exceptions to this in my worldview, but I know what I was thinking at 18.
Yeah, you're innocent. You're a victim. If you're, yeah.
Whatever I would have, I mean, I had the wrong surrounding. I'm just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I am not a criminal. I'm not a bad person. I don't think, when I saw like all the girls that were literally on a chain gang, literally, the modern day, 12-year-olds, 13, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, that's what, like, how do these girls get locked up for essentially being a victim of a whole different crime?
Yeah, so they are held captive against their will, and then the people that are supposed to help them also hold them captive. I essentially have that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
I just have one question. And I really, you know, whether it's an 11-year-old girl or a 21-year-old girl, what little girl do you know wakes up on her 10th birthday and says, I want to sell my body for sex?
None.
And I want to be addicted to heroin.
I don't think
Well,
any.
clearly, that's what makes it so heinous. And it obviously puts somebody else behind it.
Could
right?
it?
We've got some tears in the studio right
Could
now.
Could it simply be the fact that because of the type of people that are using this, I mean, because it's being...
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to get a politician to pass a law against himself?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, because again, you go back to the whole gauche thing, and
you understand. Look, the dark side. If you want to be in a position of influence in this country, or if you want to be in a position of power or authority, not always, but
no, there are definitely good people out there.
of course there are. There are. I mean, we are in the middle of a spiritual war between good and evil. It's plain and simple. But there are so many that have at some point what I call selling your soul. They've done something, and it's been filmed, and it's been witnessed, and it's held
And
over them.
Even if they aren't, even if this isn't what they want to happen, even if it isn't something they condone, they are held for ransom by whatever dirt is on them, and they have to keep their mouth shut.
Right, and I don't want to be too cynical I'm obviously a cynical person now, but I'd be surprised, if we put all of Congress together. I mean, I'm just curious. Let's all write down the percentage of Congress, which has, 500 or so people in it, give or take. What percentage of Congress has participated in this crime as criminal element? Like being
as a participant, or just been complicit or turned a blind eye?
Not a victim. It's the buyers that create the market.
Okay.
So I'm just curious. Write these down. Let's compare and see if we get close. What percentage of our U.S. Congress has participated in this from the bad guy's perspective? How many people have? How much of Congress has dirty hands with this particular crime? I've got my number. I'll bet you we're all going to be right close to each other.
Pen. I don't have a.
By the way, Kat is using a very nice Cave Radio broadcasting pen purchased from
Right.
Ink on Paper Printing.
Best printing company in the world.
Kenny's doing his homework with one. Do you find that you get more answers right when you use a pen bought at inkonpaperprinting.com, Kenny?
Sometimes.
We'll see.
If you want to be successful in
We'll
life,
see after
you get
after next week.
ink on
Was
paper.
Gandhi the answer to any of your questions? No. Okay.
Dave D, what was your percentage?
75. You can see where
Sorry.
I'm coming
What's
from.
your percentage?
15.
I said 58.
58? I said 50. I think, and I lowballed
Okay.
it, dude. 15.
Well, I thought I lowballed it
Get
at
your head out of
15.
the. You are in the
It's a
world
select-
of make believe.
Yeah, but I mean, you think about it, that's a very selective market. It's one thing to have a proclivity to something, but to actually act, I don't know. I don't know. I don't get the mindset. I'm not a politician. I'm not that high up the food chain, and I'm no longer under the influence of the devil. So
Yeah, I say 75% minimum.
Yeah, I think somewhere between my low of 50 and Cat, you're 58, 75. That sounds more plausible to me.
I mean, I'm of the personal opinion. I don't have anything to back this up that they're basically all criminals. So
well, it's fun. Yeah, there's no corroboration to back this up. These are just
this
wild,
is just my
baseless
opinion.
claims
Absolutely.
that we happen to believe are true.
Yeah.
But if we were to write down what percentage of Congress has committed a felony in the last 5 years?
felony,
different number.
100%.
Yeah, I'm guessing now we're getting close to 100%.
Yeah, sure.
I'm
but of this
99.
particular
Because
one,
keep in mind, they can commit felonies that we can't,
Right.
which in my eyes is still a felony.
And I think the higher up you get in government, the more heinous crimes you can commit. Isn't that
They
illustrated
actually have
by
immunity on a lot of crimes that we would go to prison
Isn't that
for.
illustrated by the Democratic frontrunner for president? I think.
yeah.
No.
Yeah, go look up the
no
Clinton
hablo,
murders.
no hablo inglés.
Benghazi.
No hablo inglés.
All right, so, Kat, what can people do if you're a mother, and are you a mother, by the way?
No.
There's something that does change in you when you have children. You look at
Absolutely.
things like this because I don't look at it as a purveyor anymore. I look at it like, holy cow, those could be my kids.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like the varnish wears off real quickly. It's just not fun anymore. Maybe that's God talking to you. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure it out. But do you have any comments or any tips on if you're a mother and you've got a kid that is she's about to enter her teens, what are some of the things that she should be looking out for? What are some signs, I guess, that... And I've got a couple if you're like looking for where that might be in your notes or if you want to...
Are you... Go ahead.
The ones that I'd come across is if you have a daughter that suddenly has like a secret boyfriend.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
Or has out of nowhere a new purse or a piece of jewelry. They've been like, kid level, wined and dined a little bit. Mm-hmm. And also a new tattoo somewhere. And tattoos often are, that's the way
They're branded.
ownership
They're
is
branded.
declared via these tattoos. So there's obviously, might be unwritten, but there is a system involved here.
Yeah, and I think what's probably important, because I have 4 children.
Yeah, and they range in age.
3 of them are girls. That to keep in mind that no matter how quote unquote normal your household might be, or how quote unquote religious you might think you are and your family in this, I would say that nobody is immune to this kind of stuff.
No.
Well,
Is that true? I mean, I think
that's
it could happen to anybody, anytime.
And I think that Teresa Flores' story is absolutely a classic example of that. She was trafficked off the mean streets of Birmingham.
Oh my.
Okay, and her father was an executive for, I believe, General Electric, and her father was very, very strict. They were Catholics, and he would not allow her to date. And she was 15 years old, and he had a really strict policy. I think she wasn't going to be allowed to date until she was like 16 or 18, but she was 15. And there was a boy at school who was a senior who, you know, in her eyes was really good looking, and he was kind of popular, and he took a liking to her. And she was kind of one of those girls that I described, you know, kind of mousy. I mean, she ran track, but she wasn't, you know, super popular. And she was a pretty girl, but she was kind of plain, you know. And so one day, and this guy used to call the house, and Teresa's dad would say, look, you know, you can't do this. She's not able to date. You know, that's it. And he would just keep calling, and you know, I'm sure Teresa thought that was, you know, charming. And so one day, he came up to her, and he noticed that she missed her bus after school, and he offered her a ride home, and she thought to herself, well, a ride home's not a date. So she got in the car, and as the story we often hear, you know, as it usually goes, she lives to the left, he turned right, red flag goes off in her head, and he tells her, you know, look, I just have to stop by my house really quick. It's no big deal. It's okay, right? And she says, okay, you know. So they go to the house, pull in the driveway, and she said it was the most beautiful house that she's ever seen. Now, mind you, she lived in Birmingham. And so he invited her in, and her dad's words kind of went through her head, and she said no. And all he had to do was say 4 words, you know, but I like you. Not even I love you, just I like you. And that was enough to make her feel reassured. Gets out of the car, goes into the house. He offers her a glass of pop. It was laced with something. Okay, she passes out. Now, she comes to, and she takes off. She goes home. She doesn't tell anybody.
Right, because she
Her
thinks
dad
she's going to
is
get in trouble.
super strict, right? She tells not a soul. She takes a bath, and she forgets all about it. She's not even really sure what happened. She has an idea because at the
Does
time...
she think she was raped while she
well,
was there?
she was a virgin, right? And so she really didn't know. I mean, she was kind of, you know, kind of sure, or not sure, but, you know, kind of had an idea that maybe is what happened. But I'm sure she was also in shock after this happened. So the next day, she went to school, and 2 of this boy's cousins approached her, and they were holding an envelope. And they said, do you know so-and-so? And she said, my dad's boss? Yes. Do you know so-and-so? The youth pastor at my church? Yes. Do you know so-and-so? So the kids that I babysit after school? Yes. They're all going to die if you don't, you know, do something for us. And she's like, you know, what are you talking about? So anyways, they show her these photos. They tell her, you weren't alone. There were 3 men there, and they all had sex with her. And they took pictures of it, and they showed it to her. She spent the next 3 years in high school, going through high school, leaving her house, crawling out of her window at night. They gave her a pager. One time, she tried to refuse to comply. Her dog ran away. They called her up. Hey, we found your dog. Bam. Dog's dead. Over the phone. You know? I mean, these guys do their homework. They're slick.
That's what I mean. Normally, this is not a crime committed by a stranger.
Right.
They come in with a friendly
Exactly.
face.
He was the recruiter.
That was another story. Is this girl had a relationship?
And this kid was in high school. He was in high school
He was
with
a
her.
senior in high school. Yeah, he was a senior in high school. And, her trafficker still taunt her to this day.
Yeah, but you got to understand, the kid in high school, he is just a pawn in the game. He didn't develop the network. He didn't. It's not. This
No,
isn't
but
his
I mean,
plan.
he's still
Wait until you
involved.
find
He's
out.
still recruiting
He may have
innocent
this, but he may have
children.
the same things held over his head to get him to do the same thing.
Exactly.
You guys got to read the book to find out. The kid's name was Daniel. Wait until you see how Daniel was related to the bigger
Well, how?
people. You got to buy the book.
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh, come on. We'll buy the book anyway, but
All
come on,
right,
tell
fine.
us. You got to tell us.
No, you know what? I want to say it was an older brother or a cousin or something. I'm not 100% positive.
Yeah, that.
So
that
you do have to buy it.
So I actually have to buy it.
That's okay.
Or we
I'm
can
going
look it
to
up online, but I
I'm
don't
going to go to Amazon right now and
Do
see
you
if
guys
I can get it on
remember?
Kindle.
Do you guys remember the Elizabeth Smart story? Now that
Yeah.
one was popular.
Yeah.
Now I think why it was popular is because she wasn't really sucked into what I call like a real ring, and this is what the powers that be. It's like the Pretty Woman example. Like, oh, here's what prostitution is, and you get this picture of it, and it's not what it is at all. Elizabeth Smart. This was in 2003. Lived in a affluent neighborhood in Utah near Salt Lake City. Someone comes in at knife point, takes her out of the house. Her little 9-year-old sister's in the room, not sure what's going on, but knew something was bad. They seemed to be having a conversation. The 9-year-old was trying to describe who this was. She did not visually know who it was, but she'd heard his voice, and all she said was it sounded familiar. Flash forward 6-7 months later, Elizabeth Smart is still missing. The family's going nuts on local media trying to get coverage.
National. It was national.
Well, it
man.
became national once she was found. It may have been.
No,
you know
it
what?
was
You're right.
national when she was
John Walsh had her story.
Because that
on-
was during my MSNBC years, post 9/11. Yeah.
So about 6 months after the abduction, Elizabeth Smart's little sister, the 9-year-old, says, "I just remembered where I knew the voice from. It was a manual that was working on our house. It just came to her." And they went to the police with this lead. And the police, they didn't even bother to call a manual. They didn't even bother. They're like, this girl has no credibility. They didn't even lift a finger. Family continues on, and they find out this Emmanuel guy, that was the name of Richard Mitchell, I think was the guy's name, Brian David Mitchell, who was actually the guy that took her with his girlfriend or wife, whatever. Now, that was an abduction case, but that is not exemplary of how they go.
No.
Elizabeth Smart kind of joined their
And it's
little-
like, in a case that old, I don't care if the baby's first words are, Emmanuel did it. How do you ignore that? How do you not at least make a phone call or check up on the guy?
Dude, they don't.
I mean, there's so much in every one of these cases. The one common thread, besides the heinous nature of it, the one common thread is police bungling. There is always a cop who doesn't pay attention to a lead.
Do you think that's
And there
really-
are so many good cops out there. It drives me crazy because it seems like cops get a really bad rap because we're talking about the minority, which are the bad ones, and it makes the majority of law enforcement
No doubt about that. I
Look
think-
incompetent.
That's what you hear about, right?
right. Nobody ever talks about the good stuff.
I think
They only complain.
incompetence is a veil.
But it's the
for
same thing in
s-
every
for
one of these
sinister.
stories. Yeah, in every one of these stories you read, the Johnny Ghost thing, it's the same thing. They're hiring private investigators. They've got private investigators uncovering credible leads from credible people, and the cops are like, "You want a donut with that coffee?" I mean, there's nothing. And then they prove that to be right. And after they've proven themselves several times to law enforcement already that they should have looked at those leads, their leads were still ignored. How?
Because the higher-ups told them to dump this case, ignore it, blow it off, get this lady out of her hair. That's what I mean. Incompetence and sinister, there's a very fine line.
Yeah.
And if you've been trained with our tax dollars to keep us safe, what sort of person wouldn't follow up on a lead given to them? Like, you don't have time for one extra. Yeah, I don't want to.
Well,
I haven't worn their shoes, but I get upset when we get so close to putting an end to some of these crimes, and it's just.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
it's
but I mean,
just as simple. It's sometimes, because I lived through this, sometimes it's just as simple as pride. It gets in the way, man.
Yeah.
They know better. They're right. You're emotional. You don't know what you're talking about. This kind of thing. Pride gets in the way. And then, of course, when they are wrong, they can't be wrong because it's pride. Pride, obviously, is dangerous. We understand this. But I think that's really simply what it boils down to.
Yeah, you're right.
That's a good
You're right.
point.
It's just ego. It's pride.
It blows my mind because if there's this much incompetence or sinisterness, is that the right word? That's happening in these very high profile cases where you're kind of under the microscope. I mean, these are, Elizabeth Smart and the Ghosh case was. I mean, it was all over the news even back then. This was a long time ago. We didn't have the news cycle we have now. But if there's that much documented incompetence in these cases, can you imagine?
Well, go back to
the ones that don't get the A team.
We'll go back to the T-shirt story. Here, the blinders were up. They were focused on the drugs.
Yeah, right.
When clearly, what was clearly more heinous in that house, they missed it
It's the child
completely. They
prostitution,
missed
yeah.
it completely.
And
They
they
all go
blew
home,
it.
little girl, kind of thing. When what was actually right in front of their face, when they're just worried about busting the drug dealers and the the users or whatever. But really, what was really the bad thing? They're just like, get out of my way, Because can you imagine the amount of paperwork involved in that? I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I got you. Sad that's what it comes down to.
If a young girl finds herself being quote unquote classically abducted, being taken like by physical force against her will, what should she do?
Well, if she can get to a phone, the human trafficking hotline number is 888, and I know now we have to look it up. because as soon as you looked at me,
Starts with
7.
888.
It's 3737888.
yes.
You can also text HELP to 233733. I was going, that's an ideal world, get to a phone or something like that.
Right.
Should they listen to their captors and go quietly, or should they put up a fight and kick and scream and make as much noise as possible?
You know what? I don't feel comfortable answering that question just because there's different schools of thought on that, and I'm not a psychologist or an expert, on that stuff.
There's probably different captors too. What may work with one set of captors is not going to work with another.
Exactly. You have some of these girls, like I said, it depends on what state of mind they're in. I mean, if they're suffering from Stockholm syndrome, well, they're suffering from Stockholm syndrome. They're stuck there. They think their captors are okay. If they're created this second identity that's peeling off of them every time they're on the street, and you try to talk to them when they're in that frame of mind, it's almost like talking to a brick wall, So I guess, I really don't know what to say. The only thing that I would say, and it's the most important thing, is if you have faith in God, pray, I mean.
That is, you just brought that up, and this was in my mind earlier, and it was stuck there kind of. Thinking about this in, from the 30,000, foot perspective, right? Could we make a fair assessment that the complete absence of God in these households is what directly leads to this sort of thing?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say so. Yeah.
I think that's an honest
I
deduction.
I think
absolutely.
I would
being
absolutely say so.
coming from a godly house, and there is more protection offered to us than we, I think, could ever imagine in this lifetime. We'll find, maybe, we may find out, some of us later on, exactly how almost intrusive the spiritual world was in keeping us straight, or if we turned our back on that reality, how much we were in danger because we had done that. And I think that's what you're getting at, when there's...
There's not only that, I think you're looking from a family dynamic, because there's a lot of people in my house. And it's like being grounded as having God as the center of our little our little hamlet there, that we're more involved with each other, so we kind of know what's going on with each other all the time. And not like personal, private stuff, but I mean, I think that if something was off, like if I just decided to develop, this habit where I'm drinking every night, my wife would notice. My kids would be like, yo, what's going on, Dad? This is crazy. What are you doing? I mean, where instead of saying, like we have situations where parents have a drug problem and don't pay attention to their kids.
Right.
And all these dynamics we kind of outlined what leads to this kind of thing, when really what's missing in the whole situation as a whole.
Well, I think the biggest problem is that, and I don't know exactly where it started up. I like to blame a lot of things on the 80s. But at some point, children became accessories. And not, when we decided to have a child, I had a conversation with my wife, and I've had a conversation with other parents trying to cultivate their parenting instincts. It's like, for me, what I've told several people when having a conversation is, the second you make the decision to have a child, or the second you have a child, and the child is actually born, okay, it's not about you anymore. It's about the kid. And if you're not paying attention to your kid, I mean, I understand people have problems. People are, single mothers have to work, and especially if you're drug addicted, well, you've got a whole other set of problems. But I could be naive, but I think it boils down to awareness.
You keep going backward. Why are there so many single? These are rhetorical questions, but why are there so many single mothers? Why are women working now? 100 years ago, it was typically in a household, women were raising the children. And don't get me wrong, I'm not making judgments about ERA
work,
or anything like
right?
that.
That is work.
Without a doubt it is.
Oh, yeah.
And I do find it ironic that it was the Rockefeller Foundation and Nick Rockefeller talking to Aaron Russo, film director, producer we were talking about last week, Trading Places, who had confided in him that the whole ERA movement was funded by the Rockefellers, not for the good of women.
No, it's so they would make money and stimulate the economy.
And tear apart families.
To tear apart families. I mean, they were literally coming at this from a demonic, evil angle, serving their Luciferian master, whatever you want to call him. And so they funded this movement, and it was, embraced with success, which it was in a lot of ways. But look what has happened to the family home in the last 50 years. It's been wiped out.
Yeah.
And the house you described, like the house that I was in, was not like that house. And we were colliding because we couldn't agree on how much God should be in the house, from 0 to, I was at a lot. And
0 to a lot.
I will say this, and it's hard.
What is the diametric opposite of 0?
And it must have been traumatic for my ex, because that's not who she started. That's not who she was with when we started. Like, I changed a lot.
Sure.
And having kids changed me a lot. But I'm speaking to all four of you guys. This is my personal advice. This is my kids. If you ever have a gut feeling about something and you think that something's off, just get out of there. Get away. And I don't care if you're uncomfortable or a little bit embarrassed or whatever. Better to go through 100 of those than one incident where you got snared by something. And I don't know this is not advice for the public. This is just, again, this is my personal advice to the ones that were in my house from now 19 all the way down to 5. Fight, kick, scream. Like, if you ever sense you're being pulled away, make the biggest deal out of it you can.
Yeah.
Attract attention. Your best chance of getting away is going to be at the moment.
Yeah, at the
because
moment.
Once they've got too many resources, tools, and
I can tell you what
handkerchiefs
my
with
advice
sauce
to my daughters was as a father. So I think you could probably.
What would be your personal advice?
when you stick the knife in, twist it so the bleeding can't stop.
Okay, now we're talking.
Well, I didn't really answer your question clearly earlier. What I meant to say is, you said, what do you do if you get taken? Most of these girls aren't taken. If you get abducted, I mean...
Yeah, it's a slow process.
There is
I know.
There is a matter of difference, of opinion. Like, do you fight back? I personally would run. That's what I would do, because if somebody's going to take a shot at you, there's a 50-50 chance they're going to do that, right? And if they do it, there's a 50-50 chance they're going to hit you. And if they hit you, there's, and it goes on and on. But most of these cases aren't abduction.
Right, I know.
off the
I'm
street.
having
So
a-
what do you do when you're under their control? I mean, if you can get to a phone, you're kidnapped. You're a hostage is what, well, not a hostage, but, you're a captive.
The stereotype of the crime is clashing with the reality of the crime, and it's not really a crime of an event. It is a process. It's a systemic.
Exactly.
People get lured in
Right.
over time. They don't just one night.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Although there are the one night stories. I ran away and I just got in with some bad people. Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But very often they're groomed almost.
Yeah.
By someone that's close by in their circles.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the strangers you need to be looking out for. It's the people we know.
Yeah.
In Elizabeth Smart's case, it was a man that had come to work on the house and did some.
Yeah, he'd been there for a
some-
short period of time.
And again, there's almost always
There's
from
usually
someone
a
that has
connection.
committed some minor crimes in his life. You don't want to get caught, so you want to be as familiar with all the stuff
Did
going
any of
on
those
as
crimes
possible.
involve backdoor.com or whatever you were talking about earlier?
No,
Well,
no
and-
sex crimes on
not
my
quite,
book.
not quite that heinous.
I know we got to wrap it up, but I just want to just add real quick one more thing is, if you're out and about places like the mall, nail and hair salons, massage parlors, playgrounds and schools, bars, strip clubs, hotels, those are the places that you might
In other words,
see.
stay home.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we're just kidding.
Yeah,
those
it
are
always
the
happens when
places-
you're out.
Those are the places that you might see a girl who's being trafficked. And, if you're not sure, if, just like you said, if you have that gut instinct or your conscience is telling you or the Holy Spirit is saying to you, hey, something is not right, then ask questions. And some questions you can ask a girl is, hey, what's your address? Or, what city do you live in? Or how do I get to here from there? If there's hesitation, you'll know what to say when you see that. Just ask common sense questions that a girl should know the answers to. And if the responses are, strange to you, then follow that instinct. And
That's good
better to be
advice.
safe than sorry.
Okay, well, that's pretty much it for this week on Down the Rabbit Hole. I'd like to thank our guest, Cathryn, for showing up today. And I'd like you guys to remember, have nothing to do with fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them.